Most people don't realize it, but we live inside a modern psychological prison, one without walls, bars, or guards. It's built from constant interaction, endless messages, and the subtle pressure to respond, react, and show up as the person others already believe you to be. Every conversation, every expectation, every casual comment pulls you back into an identity you may have outgrown long ago. The roles people assign you begin to function like anchors, holding you in place even when you feel the desire to move forward. And in this trapped state, something quietly but profoundly damaging occurs. You remain defined by who you were, not who you are becoming. As Jung would say, every notification keeps you who you used to be. This is why transformation rarely happens in the open. As long as you are immersed in the environments, relationships, and routines that constantly reaffirm your old identity, change becomes almost impossible. The world mirrors back to you the version of yourself you're trying to escape. Jung's thesis was clear. For real inner evolution to unfold, there must be a rupture, a deliberate break from the patterns and expectations that shape you. Transformation requires silence. It requires withdrawal. It requires the courage to step away from the eyes and voices that fix you in place. To become someone new, you must stop allowing the world to repeatedly confirm the old you. Only in that quiet, unobserved space does the true process of becoming begin. Most people misunderstand what it really means to withdraw from the world. They see isolation as weakness, avoidance, or emotional collapse. But Jung viewed it completely differently. For him, stepping away from external noise was not an escape. It was a rite of passage, a psychological descent that every individual must undergo if they hope to meet their true self. He called it the conscious descent, a deliberate choice to interrupt the performance of daily life and create space for inner reconstruction. This descent is not about deleting social media for a weekend or skipping a few social events. It's a deeper, more radical break, a suspension of the social roles you've been trained to play. It is a pause from the constant need to respond, explain, justify, and maintain the identity the world has built around you. Jung himself lived this experience after his break with Freud. He withdrew from the scientific spotlight, from professional expectations, even from the predictable structure of daily routines. In the quiet of his retreat at Bollingen, on the shores of Lake Zurich, he built a life that allowed him to face the depths of his psyche. He drew mandalas, sculpted stone, walked alone, and wrote extensively. While the world speculated about his silence, he was rebuilding himself from the inside out. But the silence of isolation is not comforting. It is exposing. When you remove the distractions that normally drown out your inner world, whatever lies hidden beneath rises to the surface: your fears, your contradictions, your unresolved desires, the parts of yourself you learned to silence to fit in. Jung understood that withdrawing from the world is like stepping into a dark cave with only a small light. What you discover there can be disorienting, even frightening. But he also believed that this descent is essential because the path to individuation, the path to becoming whole, begins with this rupture. To be reborn psychologically, the old identity must first dissolve. This is why disappearing, even temporarily, is not avoidance but preparation. It is the foundation on which a new, more authentic self can finally begin to take shape. Disappearing is not simply the act of stepping away. It is the act of rebuilding. Jung never advocated for chaotic or impulsive withdrawal. He understood that without structure, isolation can quickly slip into confusion or stagnation. That is why true disappearance must be strategic, an intentional redesign of your inner and outer world. It is not hiding from life. It is constructing the conditions necessary for transformation. Jung believed that the individual needs a protected psychological space where external influences no longer dictate who they are. And to create that space, 4 pillars are essential. The first pillar is the radical reduction of availability. This is the moment you take back control of your time and attention. It begins with something deceptively simple: turning off notifications, limiting access, and establishing periods where you are unreachable. It means no longer explaining your absence or justifying why you need space. When you restrict how much of you the world can constantly pull on, an internal shift begins. You regain sovereignty over your energy and attention. You stop being a character on call and start becoming a person again. The second pillar is the elimination of passive consumption. In modern life, the mind is constantly filled with noise, news cycles, entertainment, short videos, social feeds. This flood of stimuli fragments attention and suffocates the inner voice. Jung knew that the unconscious cannot emerge in a mind that is overstimulated. So to truly disappear, you must stop feeding your mind with everything that keeps you reactive. Replace consumption with creation. Write more. Think more. Build something. The moment you stop being a spectator, you begin reclaiming authorship of your life. The third pillar is the creation of reconstruction routines. Once the world is quiet and the distractions fade, you must fill that space with practices that strengthen the new identity you're cultivating. Deep reading, reflective writing, physical discipline, skill development, meaningful projects. These routines become the scaffolding for the person you're becoming. Jung believed that the psyche responds to concrete action. Every repetition reinforces the new path you've chosen. You are not just changing internally. You are proving it through behavior. And finally, the fourth pillar is the transformation journal. This is not a diary about daily events. It is a record of your rebirth. A place where you document who you are becoming, where you confront your shadows, observe your patterns, and give shape to insights that would otherwise slip away. Writing becomes a laboratory for your psyche, a mirror that reveals your evolution and a map that guides you forward. These 4 pillars are not theoretical ideas. They are practices Jung used during his own period of withdrawal, and they remain some of the most powerful tools for inner change. They turn disappearance into a disciplined act of reconstruction. And yet, even with structure in place, the hardest part of disappearing is still ahead. The moment when the noise finally fades, and the silence forces you to meet the parts of yourself you've avoided for years. There comes a moment in the process of disappearing when everything around you becomes quiet, truly quiet. The world, once so loud and demanding, suddenly recedes. The messages slow down, the invitations stop coming, the notifications fade. For many people, this silence feels peaceful for a brief moment, almost like a relief. But soon, a deeper and more unsettling reality emerges. The silence becomes uncomfortable. It becomes heavy. It begins to expose all the things the noise once helped you avoid. In the first few days of strategic disappearance, your mind will resist the stillness. It will try to drag you back into distraction. You might feel the urge to check your messages, scroll through social media, or reconnect just to feel normal. This is not weakness, it is withdrawal. You are breaking a dependency on external stimulation, and the mind protests by offering you quick escapes. But if you stay disciplined and resist the temptation, something remarkable begins to happen. The fog lifts, and beneath it, the contents of your unconscious start to rise. This is where the real confrontation begins. Without the steady hum of distraction to drown it out, your inner world becomes unavoidable. Old fears you thought you had outgrown, regrets you buried, anger you never addressed, dreams you abandoned, all of it comes to the surface. Jung wrote about this with a kind of brutal honesty. The psyche, once no longer anesthetized by noise, begins to reveal its stored shadows. This is why silence feels painful, not because silence hurts, but because silence removes the shield that protected you from yourself. Yet this discomfort is not a sign you are doing something wrong. It is proof that the transformation has begun. In this raw exposure, the masks you've worn for years start to crumble. You see clearly the ways you've lived for approval, how often you shaped yourself to avoid rejection, how much of your identity was built to satisfy the expectations of others. For the first time, you begin to understand the difference between who you truly are and who you were performing. Jung believed that no genuine transformation is possible without facing this internal descent. The pain of silence is the threshold. It is the necessary opening that reveals what has been neglected or suppressed. And though it feels chaotic, frightening, even disorienting, it is in this very chaos that clarity begins to form. The silence becomes a crucible where the old identity dissolves, making space for the new one to emerge. This stage is the hardest part of disappearing, but it is also the most essential. Because without confronting what lies within, rebirth is impossible. After weeks or even months of disciplined silence, something inside you begins to shift. The transformation doesn't happen suddenly or dramatically. It grows slowly, quietly, like roots spreading beneath the soil. From the outside, nothing seems different. But internally, the structure of your identity is being rebuilt. The noise that once pulled you in every direction has lost its power. The roles that once defined you no longer fit. Instead, a new presence begins to form, steady, grounded, unmistakably yours. When the moment finally comes to return to the world, it does not feel like stepping back into an old life. It feels like emerging from a long, internal journey. And the most striking part is this: the world will look at you, but it will not fully recognize you. People may comment that something about you seems different, though they can't explain what it is. Your face is the same. Your voice is the same. But there is a subtle transformation in your energy, an inner clarity, a quiet firmness, a sense of self that wasn't there before. This is the irony of disappearing. While you were gone, people assumed nothing was happening. They thought you were simply absent, quiet, disconnected. But in that silence, you were doing the most important work of your life. And now, without trying, you return with a presence that unsettles some and inspires others. Those who once expected you to play the same old roles may feel confused or even uncomfortable because they were prepared to meet the version of you they always knew. Instead, they encounter someone who no longer bends under the weight of external expectation. Jung believed that this moment is inevitable when the psyche has been truly transformed. Once old identifications are dissolved and the ego is restructured, you no longer react to life in the same way. You become a creator instead of a responder. You choose your boundaries with intention. You speak with a different level of authenticity. You no longer chase validation because your sense of worth comes from a deeper source, your own inner alignment. The beautiful part of this rebirth is that you do not need to explain yourself to anyone. You don't have to justify where you were or why you stepped away. The transformation speaks through your actions, your choices, your presence. You move differently. You think differently. You refuse to shrink back into old patterns. Some people may pull away, unable to adjust to this new version of you. Others may feel drawn toward your clarity. Either way, the change is real, and it radiates without effort. The return is not a performance or a grand reveal. It is a quiet emergence, a psychological reincarnation. And the world, whether it understands it or not, now meets someone who has faced their own depths and come back stronger. You have become a person shaped not by expectation, but by truth. When you emerge from strategic disappearance, life does not simply return to how it was before, and you no longer expect it to. You move through the world with a different kind of awareness, one that cannot be unlearned. The people, habits, and environments that once shaped your identity now reveal their influence with startling clarity. You see where you used to shrink yourself, where you tolerated what drained you, and where you abandoned your own needs just to maintain an image. But now, you carry a sense of inner independence that no longer bends so easily. This is the beginning of real freedom. True freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want whenever you want. It's far deeper and more mature than that. Real freedom is the ability to live without being held hostage by other people's expectations. It is the strength to act from integrity rather than insecurity, to choose your path based on your inner compass rather than external pressures. The version of yourself that returns from silence is no longer driven by the need to belong or be approved of. Instead, you begin making decisions rooted in who you truly are, not in who others want you to be. This new way of living rearranges everything. You start showing up differently in relationships. You speak with more sincerity, even when the truth is uncomfortable. You set boundaries not out of defensiveness, but out of clarity. You feel less reactive to criticism and less addicted to praise. The noise of the world still exists, but it no longer governs your emotional state. You have stepped out of the psychological prison you once inhabited, and now the doors you thought were locked forever are wide open. Jung understood that individuation, the process of becoming your true self, was not about escaping the world, but about returning to it with a transformed consciousness. You don't disappear forever. You disappear long enough to rebuild the foundation on which your life stands. And when you come back, you begin to live based on principles, not impulses. On presence, not performance. On purpose, not distraction. Everything becomes more intentional. How you speak, how you choose, how you work, how you love. The irony is that the world around you may remain largely the same, yet your experience of it becomes unrecognizable. You are no longer lost in it. You are no longer shaped by its currents. You inhabit it with a steadiness that others can feel, even if they can't name it. This quiet confidence becomes your anchor, and it allows you to navigate life with a sense of direction that once felt impossible. This is the true reward of disappearing, not escape, but rebirth. The life that follows is not a return to the old, but the beginning of a new way of being, one that is truer, freer, and far more aligned with the person you were always meant to become. Disappearing for a period of your life is not an act of abandonment. It is an act of courage. It is the deliberate decision to step away from everything that keeps you small, distracted, and dependent on external validation. Most people will never allow themselves this kind of inner journey because it demands honesty, discipline, and a willingness to confront the parts of themselves they've avoided for years. But those who do take this path discover something extraordinary, that the self they had been performing was only a fraction of who they truly are. Strategic disappearance is not a pause in your life. It is an initiation. It is the modern equivalent of entering the symbolic cave, dark, quiet, and intimidating, where all great transformations begin. Jung understood that psychological growth cannot occur under constant observation. The self needs darkness the way a seed needs soil. It needs a protected space where old identities can dissolve and new ones can take shape. And when you choose to withdraw, not as an escape, but as a conscious act of reconstruction, you give yourself that space. What emerges from this process is not a perfected version of you, but a whole one. Someone who is not constantly pulled by the expectations of others. Someone who is not fragmented by distraction or weighed down by old narratives. Someone who makes choices with intention, speaks with clarity, loves with depth, and moves through life with a sense of grounded purpose. This version of you does not need applause. It does not need permission. It simply exists, authentically, fully, unapologetically. The world may not understand your journey, but it will feel the result. Your presence will shift. Your boundaries will strengthen. Your direction will sharpen. And slowly, without saying a word, you will become a reminder to others that they, too, can choose a different way of living, one not defined by the noise of the external world, but by the quiet strength of the inner one. If this message resonates with you, then your journey is already beginning. And if you feel called to take your first step, declare it. Say it out loud or write it down. I am ready to disappear. This is more than a sentence. It is a commitment to your rebirth. A recognition that the life you want requires the courage to leave behind the person you no longer are. Your transformation does not start when the world sees it. It starts now, here, in the silence within you. And if you continue forward with honesty, discipline, and patience, you will not just disappear. You will return, reborn, awakened, and entirely your own.